I'm Christopher Rosen with Gold Derby. I'm so pleased to be joined by John Monsky, creator, writer, historian, and narrator, Habib Azar, director, Ian Weinberger, music director and arranger, Meredith Wagner, executive producer, and Patrick Hemingway Adams, the historical consultant on Eyes of the World, from D-Day to VE Day. This is just a great special. It was so unique watching, and I had so many, I really enjoyed it. I guess just to start, obviously, John, with you, it's such, a unique mix of so many different mediums. I guess, like, for you, where do you start in conceiving of the project in terms of how it will play out on stage for you and the audience?
So all of this stuff and that you see on the stage, and it's just so hard to describe to people. People say, what is it? It comes from the heart. So there's a lot of elements on the stage. There's the orchestra, which Ian drives, and the music. There's what people like to call material culture, actual flags that landed on the beach on D-Day, 4 to 5 Broadway singers. I'm narrating, and then a big element of this is the visuals in the back, which we mine takes me a couple of years to mine those, a lot of them from the National Archives, some of which you've never seen, some of which come from families. So you put all that together, and then the secret sauce is people like Patrick Hemingway Adams, because in this particular film, the families of J.D. Salinger, the Hemingway family, Lee Miller's family, and the estate from Robert Capa, all added elements that you wouldn't see. But it all starts from the heart in terms of these are things that interest me, and then I drag the team into it and try to get them hooked on it. And you see what's on the stage there is sort of this unique mix of things. So the good news is it's really great and fun to watch. The bad news is it's kind of hard to describe it all.
It seems like it would be very hard to make as well. I guess Meredith is producer. How do you how do you what is your role in bringing this to life? I guess I'm working with John and everybody here to create such a unique, like you're saying, and kind of defies any thing I've seen before, but which was in a great way. So I guess where do you start for you? What is your process like?
Well, John stole my line because our biggest challenge is explaining to people what these shows feel like and how all those elements come together. I bore many people with my descriptions because I don't think you can capture how unique it feels to watch these shows with these amazing elements fused to tell these brilliant stories. My job is just really keeping the trains running on time. We have an incredible team, John and Ian and cast and people like Patrick. It's a quite joyful process.
It's always a fun moment when I come to Ian and say, okay, I got the script. Here's the music I'm thinking of. And he's like, oh my God, where do we start?
So Ian, where do you start with here? Because the music is such a great, and it's again all different, totally. I don't know. I guess I will stop saying this. But I was like, man, I just did not. It constantly surprised me. I guess watching this, I was always and never did what I was expecting, which in a great way. So I guess where do you start with the music and figuring out who to do and what even what songs, and also the performance as well, who you're who is singing these songs, why these Broadway singers that we have on stage that are so great, where do you start with all that?
Use of the word surprise is a fair one and a good one, and that's actually a big goal of mine just as a musical storyteller, is to try to delightfully surprise people, not scare anybody, but to continually be one step ahead perhaps of what's coming next in the evening. Where to start is a perfectly good question that has all sorts of answers to it. I think the very, very basic first bones of it come from John, who in his first draft of it will say just what John just said, and he'll say a version of, these are the songs I'm thinking about including in roughly this order, in roughly these parts, these places in the evening in the show, and so a lot of the songs that pieces of music that you see in the course of the show come straight out of John's first initial draft. In some cases, it might be just about the placement of it. It feels like this is a couple of lines too late, or it feels like this is not the right energy. Perhaps the song is not the right emotional moment for what we're trying to say in that beat in the story. And so that might be part of the give and take. Is it's definitely the right place for a song, but maybe this isn't the right song. And then it's about, how long is it between songs? How long has it been since we heard somebody sing something? And that's in my normal life, I'm a musical director for musical theater. And so that I approach it the same way I do if I'm building a musical from scratch, is sort of corkboarding, storyboarding the evening from a musical point of view. And the performers themselves come out of my own just like personal professional Rolodex, our director's professional personal Rolodex, the Rolodexes of each other when we need recommendations for people. These are people who either we know and love and have worked with, or people who are recommended to us, who we know will fit these personas and will deliver the material musically and storytelling wise in a way that is going to help us be as impactful.
And Ian does just a brilliant job of, there's underscoring through this whole thing, and he creates that underscoring, bridging the pieces. I'll have the pieces in mind, but the early meetings are really fun because I'll say, Ian, we're in the Hurtgen Forest. It's dark. I'm terrified. And then he creates that underscoring. So it drives the story forward. And as a narrator that's up there for, almost 2 hours, it just propels you. It's great. And he has a genius for that. And where it comes from, the two of us, mad scientists, it's kind of scary. It's good they don't have a camera on us sitting at the piano trying to figure this out. And he sometimes he'll say, I got to go home and think about that. But what he comes back with the next day, it's crazy. And then when, we were working with Patrick and talking things about, his family in Cuba and Ernest Hemingway in Cuba, and Patrick tells us stories straight from the family, that comes in to both the story and the music.
Patrick, for you, like, what, I guess, obviously, like, Ernest Hemingway is such a huge part of this movie. His great grandmother. How, like, for you, what is can you talk about, like, your relationship with John and, like, kind of your role in this to make sure that, I guess, everything is remaining authentic, but, like, exactly, like, within the theme of the piece, but also authentic to what your family would experience, stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think right from the jump, when John and I were introduced, it was kind of it was a Brady Bunch Zoom like this with a bunch of people. And we just ignored everybody else and kind of geeked out about flags and military history and all this stuff. And it was just really an easy chemistry early on, which I thought was great because now I felt comfortable sharing some intimate stories that we have that fit into this. Because World War II in particular is sort of the most misunderstood period of the most analyzed figure, of the modern age. So it was just an easy fit to jump in with both feet and try to look for a way to tell some of these stories that make sense in the context of the bigger piece.
I mean, for you, obviously, we're talking about this incredible. It seems like a big challenge, I guess, as director. How do you kind of like put all this together to make it work as well as it does when we're watching the final product? And then I guess also I was thinking this too. Not to just step on the question, but I was like, obviously, this is being performed live with an audience, and then also we're watching it on, like, for me, I didn't get to see it live, but I'm watching it on TV. Do you think about that in terms of the directing, like, I guess, how to balance both those audiences at all?
Well, first I'll say that I'm very blessed to come to this project, which is fully formed late in the process. So I come to it when they're ready to turn it into a television special. And they have this incredible, like you said, just completely different, completely new. John put together this brilliant piece of history, music, entertainment that is constantly surprising, constantly engaging, has a dramatic arc that you dream of being able to work with. And then, I fly in and try and turn it into a television product. And like you said, we're here to watch it on TV. So it's a very different need for the audience. And we have so many more opportunities with the camera placement. And it combined a lot of things that I do in my career with music and with theater. And you have this opportunity, right? Like it's in many ways a documentary, but it's also in many ways a performance. So where do you put the camera? How do you integrate the audience? How do you transition from documentary footage to live historical lecture to musical performance, Broadway performance? And it was this incredible palette that I got to paint in, and was great fun. And I think it turned out into a great TV show.
And I couldn't figure out how he was going to do it, because you got layer after the whole thing about this is it's a 7-layer cake. And he just did a fantastic job of picking up Lee Miller's photography, Robert Capa's photography of Lee Miller, photography from the National Archives of the boat's landing, while still seeing the orchestra, while still seeing the singers, while still seeing the story. And of course, Ian's baton, Ian at the piano in this production, and often he's with the baton and on some of the other productions. It was pretty amazing, and you couldn't figure out how he was going to get it all in that one camera.
The other element, just to jump in, are these live flags, these actual physical flags that we dotted around the space. And, the first question is, where do we put them? Both for the camera and for the audience. And, you piggybacking on the audience experience, right? So the audience sees this flag, but they don't know what it is until this aha moment, 45 minutes into the piece, where it's revealed that this flag was held on the beaches and it's right over there, right over your head. So, it's a joy as a director to try and create that sense of tension and reveal with the camera, so that as you're watching at home, you're getting the same experience or even a better experience as the audience in the house.
And Chris, there's one other thing, which is this element of people standing up. That, my great grandfather was on those beaches, and there were the moments in the audience which were captured so well in the camera are pretty riveting, because you kind of the long line is connected between what's happening on the stage and then these historical moments. And we didn't do this on camera. At the right moment, when Hemingway is headed off to the Battle of the Bulge, I asked Patrick to stand up, and it's very visceral. He kind of is Hemingway reincarnated in a way. And, we have this exchange, and he's pointing at me and I'm pointing at him, and you feel like Hemingway's standing right in front of you. But there was also, a lot of the story drives around this incredible, unexpected relationship between a counterintelligence officer in the 4th Infantry Division and Ernest Hemingway, who's embedded in the 4th Infantry Division. They become fast friends. Well, by coincidence, the counterintelligence officer's son, Patrick Hemingway, meet in Symphony Hall 80 years later, after their families first met. So there's some cool moments that the camera has to pick up too from the audience.
And I feel like those moments are what makes one of the things I found so moving about the special is that it's like it's not like ancient history. You know what I mean? Like, this is like not far. That was one of the things I just kept coming back to watching the zero. I was like, wow, this is like not. I think people maybe think about World War II, and especially nowadays when everything is like the news cycle is so fast. It's like, there's like, it's just a crazy, we all know this is nuts this time. But I'm like, wow, it's really not. It just is so not far away. And I just found that like just the constantly being reminded of that was like the flags of, like you're saying, like the ancestors. And it just is like, we know these people and this is still part of our lives in a really moving fashion, I guess. Was that surprising to you? Probably not, because you're writing this, but I mean, was that like something that you like noticed too, obviously?
It got incredibly close when Ian and I were working on the piece about the Hurtgen Forest. And I'll let Ian tell that story.
Both of my grandfathers served in the Second World War in Europe, and I knew that growing up, and I was too young to inquire any more than that. To certainly, of course, if they were alive today, I'd have 4 zillion questions for both of them. Now that I've worked on this show for so many years, and I had known that my dad's dad lost a leg in the war, and that was sort of all I knew about it. And I wasn't, wise enough yet to ask more questions of either of them. And I've been working on the show with John for probably a year and a half, and got to know the chapters of the story that way, just as I do working on a musical, right? Or reading a history book. And I just, for fun, now that I've gotten immersed, both of my grandfathers wrote self-published little war memoirs, spiral bound, that they printed at Kinko's, like 40 pages each or something like that of their time in Europe. And I read them both just now that I've been immersed in the shows. This is 4 years ago, maybe. And I am reading my paternal grandpa's, and he starts writing about how he and his battalion went into the Hurtgen Forest, and that's where he lost this leg. And the light bulb moment for me was I would never have had any context for the Hurtgen Forest in Belgium had I not been working on this show. That's not a location I'm familiar with or would have been familiar with otherwise, or that possibly many others who are not war historians, right? And so, but of course it jumped off the page because now I've heard of this place. I knew he lost the leg, but he lost the leg in this battle of all places. And so I brought this to John and I said, you're never going to believe it, but and I'm not even making it up this time. And so John was kind enough to include Grandpa Marty in the show. And it's a really wild and kind of fun connection to be able to tell briefly the story of this battle that was so bloody and so devastating for the Americans, and so hard and horrifying and gruesome. And as one example of the death and destruction, somebody loses a leg, and we happen to have their grandson with us, and it's me. And what's horrifying is that now that we've been working on it long enough that I look more and more like my grandpa the longer we do it. But it's a fun connection, and it's really special to be able to honor him in that way, in that very personal and particular way.
It came as a great surprise to me as we have been digging into the Hurtgen deep, and this whole. So I would say it's not just, sorry, Ian, but I would say it doesn't just happen there. It doesn't stop there. John Heyman, who helped us with this, is a good friend and helped us a lot. His Uncle Paul wrote Band of Brothers. And we opened the show up with Uncle Paul's Band of Brothers piece. And so, and it's just filled with that. There's not a time that goes by a member of the orchestra doesn't step up and say, my cousin or my mother was in the 688, the all-black, all-female, Black and Latina battalion that we talk about, or the 761st Tank Battalion, which, came to Patton's rescue, had Jackie Robinson in that battalion. It just seems to pour out in this film.
Patrick, along those lines, for you, obviously, are you learning stuff about Ernest Hemingway that you maybe didn't even realize going through this process, I guess?
Oh, all the time, and really through the same process that everybody's talking about, which is kind of fun. By going to my relatives and saying, "Hey, what do you remember? About the lead up to the war?" And I'll go talk to my granddad, who was Ernest's son, and I said, what do you remember about hunting submarines? Well, an awful lot. Remember the highlight players throwing baseballs in the driveway to practice for throwing hand grenades from the boat. It's amazing what comes out when you can get really specific and say, what do you remember about this period? Well, they remember Robert Capa coming over and teaching the kids how to work a camera. just wild stuff. So through a new lens, I was able to learn an awful lot about it just by asking the right questions to the right people.
John, Habib mentioned something before about performance, and I was wondering this too, because obviously there's a level of performance here as you're doing the monologue, and obviously this not that you're playing a character, but I guess you're obviously performing, and I guess like how do you how much rehearsal goes into it for you, and like how are you preparing, and are you doing different are there different line readings and stuff for you? Like how do you kind of like make the performance the way it is? Because obviously like your monologue is so foundational. It's like this does not exist without that, but I think your performance is really good as well. You know what I mean? Like I think a different reading of this is different, and maybe it's a different show, but I think you're so engaging on stage, and I guess like how do you kind of get that performance, and like what kind of goes into that for you?
Well, besides having Ian play a little more if I drop a line, setting that aside, and the look, none of this came about, and everybody on the phone knows this. It was all home cooking. Like nobody sat in an office somewhere and said, this will be a great production. So it all came from the heart, and you run into people like Patrick Hemingway or the Caymans, or you go down the list, or Ian's family, who's always there in the front row. So when I get out on stage, the best thing for me is I'm just telling the story. People ask, are you nervous? I'm not nervous once I get out there. I'm a little nervous about getting there, making sure I don't have a cold, whatever. But once I'm out there, the audience just lifts you up because everybody's so connected to this. Even though, the other productions we've done that might be further away in history, we do have a bunch of history lovers in the United States. We have a bunch of collectors that love seeing these flags and the tangible moments, and it just feels very natural, and the audience always lifts us, I think.
And was this was shot over two nights? Is that right, or do I have that right? That it was over 2 nights? I guess for Habib, then, like for you, are you like, how do you do? Like, are you picking different, or like this night maybe there was a different reaction to the crowd? Like how does that come together for you as director?
Yeah, it's a rehearsal and a performance, and we're lucky to have the first night to gloss over any imperfections in the second night. But I would say it's remarkably consistent. The performances are just really fine-tuned. Like I said, I come to this, and it's so well put together and well thought out, and it lands so inevitably with the audience that for me, it's just making sure that I have the camera in the right place, that I am balancing all these different elements in the right way and creating an arc for the television audience. But having, 2 takes at it is sure nice.
We have rehearsal, show. So it's actually 4 shows. I get a little taste of what Ian goes through in his regular life. Go back to normal life after the productions. And Patrick is, there with us the whole way on these productions. And we did some warm-ups of the show outside of the camera that Patrick came to. So, but it's nice having the living legend of Hemingway right there with you in the audience, keeping you on track.
Meredith, for you, I guess, for you having done this and stuff, what was the biggest surprise, I guess, for you, or something that you were like, oh, this was even more different than I expected, and actually even better, maybe?
In this particular show, there's a moment where we play Salute to Our Fighting Forces, and the conductor and cast call out people to stand in honor of someone that they love or know who has served in each branch of the military. And in Boston, it was unbelievable. We had 80-year-old men, 85-year-old men. We had women. We had guys who were 18 and had just enlisted. And it was incredibly powerful to see them all standing together. And also other people in the audience who hadn't really thought about the connection that they had to our veterans and stood up in honor of their grandfather or their father. And they really hadn't thought about the fact that Grandpa was in World War II and what it meant for him. And when they stand, it's very, very moving. I'm always in tears, much like the rest of the audience, and I've seen it a million times. It's very powerful.
And to your point, Chris, too, like I'll just add in to what Meredith said, only to say that, it's a moment like that, particularly where I think the audiences tend to make the connection that this is not far away history, right? And the piece of music itself isn't about, and the standing of it all isn't about necessarily World War II specifically. It's about if somebody's serving right now or whatever. But there is, I think, that is one of the most successful moments in the evening, I think, where the connection is made that this was not that long ago. And certainly that it's grandfathers and great grandfathers that are part of the story, and that we knew them when they were alive, and so on. And so I think that is what is one of the things that makes it work. If it works well at all, it's partly because we're able to make that connection so real.
I think, Chris, the thing that happened for me, and part of it always changes with the music added in, because this is emotional. I like to say this is emotional history. As I started Hemingway, J.D. Salinger, this relationship, the way it unfolds, and then Ian's music accentuates that relationship. And then Lee Miller, Lee Miller is out there with Robert Capa, and Capa's friends with Hemingway, and you get these four figures, J.D. Salinger, Hemingway, Capa, and Lee Miller, and you realize they're all a heartbeat away from each other. And they're all the eyes of the world reporting on this war. And when we bring it to the end, with Ian's music at the end, you suddenly realize how close they were. These incredible, legendary figures. When I started this, I had no conception of the relationship between Hemingway and Salinger, or Miller and Capa. And by the time you're done, and even when I wrote the script, Miller just kept popping up. And as we kept working on this, it's over 5 years in the making, more and more things popped up, all the way down to, talking to Patrick about how his great-grandfather loaded, grenades all over his boat to go chase German submarines. But the four figures, they just blended together, and I think it's captured well on film, the actors and the singers. But I don't know whether that surprised you, but it did me, the way, once you brought it all live, how close they really were.
Yeah, I mean, totally. What a gift to be able to make those connections. And the live aspect is another thing I'll point out, that this is in a live show that you want to feel is happening. It's not really canned. It's about the experience in that moment, which is why we really push for that one performance.
It's hard too. I mean, when you get out there live, and Ian starts playing that music, and you're looking at Patrick. I mean, you well up a little bit, which I'm not supposed to do.
I'm glad to hear you say also that you weren't aware of some of these connections, because I was like, really, I was just like, man, this is like, I was like learning, I was like, maybe I just didn't study enough like this. So it's good to know that even you, John, were maybe a little surprised at some of these connections.
I mean, as I kept turning the pages of Lee Miller's story, and then she's running into Hemingway, and then Capa and Hemingway are having a fight over the Jeep that turned over, and just you can't believe this.
Is there a moment for you where you have to like stop researching, I guess, because I feel like you could probably keep peeling back layers of the onion maybe in these relationships and even the history of it all?
That drives Ian nuts, because we're putting stuff in the last minute, and he's like, John, I got 60 pieces that need to be on time here. So it's nice that Hemingway filed a $13,000 expense report. That's a nice, interesting thing. And he entertained all the soldiers, and his editors were mad at him for buying all the drinks. But really, hey,
but then we'll be like, we'll say, oh, well, we'll just put all this extra stuff in the playbill. The playbill would be 500 pages long if we put all John's research in it. But it's
those cameras have to change their orientation, a week before the show. But
I guess I know we have to wrap up here in a little bit, but I guess for you guys, like, What do you hope? Like, I'm kind of what we've been talking about here, but is there? Obviously, this was such a well-received special, and I feel like it's very, like you said, still timely, and I think it really was. It's great. What do you hope audiences, take away from it when they're watching it now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if they put it on right now, like, what do you hope they're going to take away from it?
What you just heard, with all this excitement about history and all this excitement about the minutia and the details, which again, I came to this late and I get to experience this, Ian and John and Meredith and Patrick and everyone involved is putting it together and finding all these connections and constantly adding more and more and more. That engagement with history is really special. It's something that my kids loved watching the special, and I hope people will share this as a family entertainment, which is incredibly moving about our history, about the history of our country, about many of our families' histories, and just being able to translate that excitement that this team has been an honor.
Look, this starts with the beaches of Normandy in an American cemetery where 9,000 of our young boys are buried from that assault on in Normandy, and you hope that people come away with a heartfelt understanding of the sacrifices that were made over there, and that they were done for a reason, and that they appreciate that. And I think our history is what binds us together. So you hope that people want to learn more and see more, and if they're lucky enough, don't go to Paris. And if you are lucky enough to go to Paris or lucky enough to be in that area, to be 3 hours from Normandy, I hope they watch this and want to go to that cemetery. There's another piece to it which I grew to appreciate more over time, and this is sort of a tribute to the reporters, the cameramen, the newspaper writers. What these four did, and I count Ernest Hemingway in that group, was amazing, right from the heart, and the way their emotions unfold. You hear their voices, all four of them, through this show, was really gripping. So you learn a little bit more about that. But at the end of the day, this is a film about sacrifice and what it means. And that's why it's aimed at Veterans Day.
Yeah, and I think you nail it. It's a great special. Eyes of the World, from D-Day to VE Day. John Monsky, Meredith Wagner, Ian Weinberger, Patrick Hemingway Adams, and Habib Azar. Thank you all for doing this. It was great talking about this special. It's wonderful.